So we just had a question pop up in chat about the difference between a good build and a bad build, but more specifically about having 56% endurance as opposed to 60% endurance. And we've been talking about math questions and percentages and values like that all day today. So why not finish off this conversation in the only appropriate way, which is by shielding our eyes and looking at something that only exists in light mode. So this is tonklab.com. I'm going to post this in chat real quick in case you haven't already seen this. Basically like the brother or sister website to Last Epoch tools. Both of these are fantastic. But one thing that Tunklab has that I reference often enough is the EHP calculator. So this is a calculation along with a couple other things. You can look up armor, you can look up block. A lot of this stuff is cool to poke around with. But for right now, we're going to look at the EHP calculator. So for this, we can type in some values and see exactly what our effective HP is against dots, against one-shot mechanics, against like average things, which will take into consideration like avoidance. And then we can also see this for non-physical hits. Because remember, armor, stuff like that, is 100% effective against fizz for mitigation, and it's only 70% as effective against non-fizz. So we got all this good information here. Let's walk through it, right? So in the background, this character that I'm playing has 100 vitality. We're super thick. We're actually not that thick, but I'll show you how to walk through this anyways. So we have 4,070 life. Let's go ahead and punch this in. And then let's see. We have 0 ward. We're in a area level 100. Nice, nice, nice. And I have, let's see. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4 sigils up, which puts us at 21 or 2911, which is 48. And then resistances, all of my res are 75 across the board. Endurance and endurance threshold. So this is going to be like the reason for the season. This is why we're having this conversation. So my endurance threshold right now is 20% of my maximum life, which that's what it is for every character. That's the default for endurance threshold. And then I also have a tiny bit of endurance threshold on these gloves. So it'll be 20% of my life plus 69. So this is, what is it? Hover over it. 883. And then I have 56% endurance because my gear is bad. For dodge, I have 0 dodge. This does not matter. And then we have no block because you have no shield, no block, no anything, no investment into it. And then for glancing blows, also 0. We need to add in one additional thing here. We're going to add a new custom damage reduction. So I'm going to add in 25% to make up for my Ravenous Void here. I've got 5 stacks. Ravenous Void says take 5% reduced damage for each stack. So let's go ahead and type this in. Let's go 25. And it's against hits. It's against all. Cool. And then we also have one more thing that's not calculated. If I'm nearby an enemy, which for the most part I am, I have another 10% less damage taken. So I'm going to put in a 10% less damage modifier here. So this is roughly speaking what our character is. So the question in chat was, why does it matter if you have 56% endurance as opposed to 60% endurance? It's like, well, it's going to be a small change, but let's see exactly how small it is, okay? So we have 14.6. Let's pretend like I got the right blessing from, what is this place called? I actually don't know what this is called. Let's pretend like I got the correct blessing from Spirits of Fire. I have a 22 roll right now, and I'd like to have something that caps me, so +4. I'd like to have a 26 or a 27 if possible. Seems hard to get. So if I had the right blessing here, my endurance would be 60% instead of 56%. Let's toggle this up. Let's see, so 14.6 right now. Go like this. And then instead of 14.6, we'd be 15.2. So like in the grand scheme of things, how important is this? It's not particularly important, but I don't have many sources of damage reduction in my build because I'm a Void Knight, right? Void Knights have a bunch of leech, but I'm also not using a shield. I don't have the same kinds of damage reduction that I could get if I were a Primalist, or if I were a Lich, or if I were a Mage speccing into like, you know, all sorts of unique items like Orion's Eye and whatnot. There's a lot of defensive setups that you can get on those other masteries, but you can't really get those here. So is it important to go from, let's look at this one, to go from 11.9 down to 11.5? Not really. It's not that important. But, you know, I'm pushing my corruption up instead of farming something that I already have a good roll of, which is like, you know, these other places aren't particularly useful. I'd rather just like continue pushing corruption here, and I can get some percentage gains by fixing my endurance here. It's a nice tool to have. I linked this in chat already if you want to poke around with it yourself. Looking at this kind of stuff, honestly, even more so maybe, Let's click back real quick. If you haven't poked around with this in the past, looking at things like the armor mitigation and like how much mitigation you're getting out of your armor for like fizz and non-fizz, how much investment is good. Looking at things like block, this kind of starts to remind you of how effective elemental resistances are, either in Last Epoch or if you're familiar with Path of Exile. This should kind of remind you of this as well, because like, the more armor you have, you're getting diminishing returns, but each additional point of armor is mitigating more damage because of how it's scaling up to its asymptote. Like, this is pretty cool. It's good stuff.